3 little girls. A custody visit that should have been ordinary. A father who vanished into the Washington wilderness. And the FBI still searching, months later, after finding human bones deep in the forest. This is not the story of strangers. It is the story of a family torn apart. A tragedy that left a community broken, investigators desperate, and a nation asking how a man trusted as a father could become the most wanted fugitive in the state. Tonight, we trace every moment. The custody handoff, the vanishing, the false leads, the discovery in the woods, and the haunting question that still has no answer: where is Travis Decker? The mountains of Washington are known for their beauty. Snow-capped ridges, thick forests stretching for miles, rivers that cut through valleys, feeding small towns and quiet campgrounds. In these settings, people hike, camp, and escape the noise of city life. But in 2025, these same woods became the center of a search that shocked the nation. A search for a father who vanished after tragedy struck his own children. Before the manhunt, before the news headlines, there was a family. A father named Travis Decker, a man in his early 40s. To outsiders, Travis seemed ordinary. He lived in Washington, worked jobs that never drew much attention, and was known by neighbors as quiet. Some described him as reserved. Others said he carried himself with a weight that was hard to read. Then there were his 3 daughters. They were young, still in the tender stages of life where the world is supposed to be about school, play, and safety. Each of them had their own spark, their own small joys. Teachers and relatives would later describe them as full of life. But the family was not united. Travis and the mother of the children were separated. Custody had become a tense subject. Friends close to the family said there were disagreements, moments where visits and schedules led to arguments and frustration. None of it prepared anyone for what would come next. It was late spring, May 2025, when the children went for a custody visit with their father. Nothing seemed unusual about it. Custody exchanges happened quietly, often without drama. For the mother, it was routine. The children were to spend time with their dad and then return. But that weekend would not end as planned. When the children didn't come home, worry turned to fear. Calls were made. Messages went unanswered. And then silence. It wasn't long before police were alerted. At first, it was treated as a missing persons case. 3 children, missing with their father, who was now unreachable. Officers began by retracing steps, speaking with family, checking known addresses. As the hours passed, the truth emerged. The daughters were found dead. Details were limited at first, but what authorities discovered shocked even seasoned investigators. And Travis was gone. The scene was heartbreaking. Law enforcement who responded later described the moment as one of the darkest they had faced. Families of officers wept as they recounted what they had seen. The news spread fast across Washington. 3 young sisters, dead, their father missing in the wilderness. For the mother, the loss was unbearable. In a matter of hours, her life had been torn apart. She had trusted the system to protect her daughters during custody arrangements. Instead, she was left with silence and grief. From the start, investigators believed Travis was responsible. The FBI issued alerts. His face appeared across news broadcasts. He was described as armed, dangerous, and possibly hiding in the forests of Chelan County. A manhunt began that would grow larger with each passing day. But before the chase, before the helicopters and search dogs, there was still one question that lingered. Who was Travis Decker, and how did a father turn into the most wanted man in Washington? This was not the story of a stranger. It was the story of a parent. A man who once cradled his daughters in his arms, who once promised them safety. And yet, by the summer of 2025, he was gone, leaving behind questions that no one has fully answered. The case began with family. And it is here, in the quiet details of that custody visit, where the story must start. The custody visit was supposed to last only a short while. The plan was simple. Travis would spend time with his daughters, then return them safely. That was the arrangement. That was the expectation. When the appointed time came and went, their mother waited. Minutes stretched into hours. She tried calling. The phone rang. No answer. She sent messages. Silence. A feeling of unease began to grow. Parents know this feeling. It starts as a whisper, then becomes a scream in the mind. Something was wrong. By nightfall, worry turned into fear. She called friends, hoping someone had heard from Travis. No one had. She tried again, her hands shaking as she dialed. Each time the call ended without a voice on the other side. Dread grew heavier. Finally, the decision was made. She called authorities. The 911 operator answered in a calm tone, but the mother's voice was frantic. She explained the situation. Her daughters were with their father. They were supposed to be home. They weren't. He wasn't answering. Something was wrong. The dispatcher entered the details into the system. Officers were dispatched. The first step was routine. Check known addresses. Drive past the father's residence. See if his vehicle was there. Talk to neighbors. But Travis was not at his home. No neighbors had seen him with the children. The trail went cold almost instantly. The mother's fear deepened. Every minute felt like a lifetime. The questions she asked out loud were the same investigators began to ask themselves. Where was Travis? Why had he not returned the girls? Police checked nearby parks and rest areas. They contacted local hospitals. Nothing. Hours later, the search widened. A description of Travis and the girls was broadcast. Patrol officers drove roads leading out of town. A be on the lookout alert was issued. The words were simple. Father and 3 daughters, last seen together, now missing. For a short time, hope remained. Maybe the car had broken down. Maybe they had gone camping without warning. Maybe it was all a misunderstanding. But then came the discovery. The daughters were found. 3 young lives ended. Details were scarce at first. Officers who responded later described the scene as haunting. The kind that never leaves you. And Travis, he was gone. In that instant, the case shifted. It was no longer a search for missing children. It was a homicide investigation. And the father became the prime suspect. Word spread quickly through Chelan County. Phones buzzed with alerts. Neighbors called one another in shock. News stations broke into programming. Parents pulled their children close, whispering about safety and trust. At the sheriff's office, a briefing was held. Maps were laid out on long tables. Deputies, FBI agents, and state patrol officers gathered. Search zones were drawn. Checkpoints planned. Helicopters requested. The wilderness of Washington is vast. Deep forests, hidden ravines, places where a man could disappear. For Travis, it was the perfect cover. For investigators, it was the beginning of a nightmare. The vanishing of a father. The loss of 3 daughters. A trail that led into the woods. By the end of that night, one truth was clear. The hunt had begun. When the call went out that Travis Decker was missing, and that his 3 daughters had been found dead, law enforcement knew they were dealing with something far greater than a routine case. This was not a lost hiker. This was not a custody mix-up. This was a father on the run, suspected of committing the worst act possible against his own children. The first night blurred into morning. Officers who had already worked long shifts stayed on. Deputies and FBI agents sat shoulder to shoulder in briefing rooms, staring at maps pinned with markers. Red circles showed campgrounds. Blue pins showed logging roads. Yellow lines traced hiking trails where a man could vanish if he knew the terrain. The question was simple. Where was Travis? The answer was anything but. Search teams mobilized at dawn. Helicopters lifted off, blades cutting through the cool spring air. Their searchlights swept over forests dense with evergreens. Officers in SUVs and trucks drove dirt roads, headlights piercing the fog that rolled through valleys. Checkpoints were set up on major roads leaving Chelan County. Drivers were stopped, their IDs checked, their trunks inspected. Every vehicle was a possibility. Every face was studied. And then came the dogs. K-9 units were deployed, noses pressed to the ground, handlers urging them forward. Dogs trained to track scent worked tirelessly, weaving through brush, crossing streams, barking when they picked up a trace. But each lead ended in frustration. The terrain was vast. The scent trails were faint. The forest seemed to swallow him whole. Back at the sheriff's office, the phone lines lit up. Tips poured in. Some claimed to have seen Travis walking along a highway. Others insisted they spotted him at a gas station. A few said he had been seen camping near the river. Each call was logged, checked, and sent to patrol units. Most were false. Each one wasted precious time. In the community, fear spread. Parents held their children closer. Schools locked doors. Churches held vigils. Neighbors whispered about what might have happened. Was he hiding in the woods? Was he armed? Would he strike again? The media swarmed Chelan County. Reporters stood outside sheriff's offices, delivering live updates. Headlines blared across television screens. Father vanishes after children found dead. Commentators speculated endlessly. How could this happen? Why had custody visits been allowed? Could the system have prevented it? For investigators, the pressure grew. Every hour Travis remained free was a failure. Every day without answers added to the community's fear. The FBI increased their involvement. Agents brought specialized tracking technology, heat-sensing equipment, and drones capable of scanning remote valleys. Search patterns were mapped by computer models. Analysts studied Travis's past movements, bank records, and phone pings. But the trail was cold. His phone was off. His car was gone. No credit card use. No digital trace. It was as if he had vanished into the wilderness. Behind the scenes, the weight of the case pressed down. Officers who had children went home at night and hugged them tighter. Investigators stared at photos of the 3 girls pinned to bulletin boards and vowed not to stop. The first search efforts lasted days. They combed ridges, checked abandoned cabins, and swept campgrounds. At times, hope flickered. A footprint in the mud. A sleeping bag left behind. A broken branch suggesting someone had passed through. Each lead carried tension. Could this be him? But time and again, hopes faded. The forest held its secrets. And Travis Decker was still gone. By the end of the first week, one reality was sinking in. This was not going to be solved quickly. The search was expanding. The danger was growing. And the story of a father's vanishing was turning into one of the largest manhunts Washington had seen in years. The first week had drained local deputies. The forest gave nothing back. No sign of Travis. No sign of movement. Just silence. That was when the FBI officially took command. At dawn, convoys rolled into Chelan County. Black SUVs, mobile command trucks, satellite dishes rising from their roofs. Agents stepped out in dark jackets with bold yellow letters on their backs. The shift in tone was immediate. This was no longer a local search. It was a federal manhunt. Inside the new command post, maps were replaced with digital screens. Satellite imagery covered the walls. Terrain models were loaded. Every logging road, trail, and backcountry cabin was plotted. Analysts traced possible escape routes. Was Travis still in the mountains, living off supplies? Had he slipped past checkpoints and disappeared into another state? One fact guided the FBI's approach. Travis Decker had nothing left to lose. He was dangerous, unpredictable, and desperate. Checkpoints were doubled. State patrol units manned every highway leading out of the region. Semi-trucks were searched. RVs pulled over. Hunters heading into the forest were questioned. The order was clear. No one comes in or out without scrutiny. Helicopters swept low, skimming treetops, searchlights piercing ravines. Fixed-wing aircraft scanned with thermal cameras, picking up the faint heat signatures of animals and possibly people. Drones whirred overhead, hovering above campgrounds and ridgelines, feeding live footage to command centers. On the ground, tactical teams pushed deeper into the wilderness. Armed with rifles and night vision goggles, they moved cautiously. Every shadow could hide a man. Every rustle in the brush set nerves on edge. The woods that once drew hikers and campers now felt hostile, as if they were guarding the man who had fled into them. At night, floodlights turned certain search zones into day. Generators roared as temporary camps were set up for agents. The sound of barking dogs echoed across valleys. The community watched with unease. Helicopters thundered overhead. Roads were blocked. Rumors spread in coffee shops and grocery stores. Some said Travis had already escaped. Others swore he was hiding in plain sight, sheltered by someone who knew him. The FBI released a wanted poster. His face stared back from screens across the nation. The text was simple: armed and dangerous. Do not approach. Report sightings immediately. Hotlines buzzed with calls. Some were genuine tips. Most were noise. Still, the FBI followed every lead. A report of a man in a hood walking along Highway 2. Agents sped there. Nothing. A camper claimed to see someone rummaging through food at night. Agents swept the area. No sign. Every false lead chipped away at morale. But no one stopped. Inside the command post, the stress was visible. Agents leaned over maps with bloodshot eyes. Deputies nodded off in chairs before jolting awake to head back out. Coffee cups stacked in corners. Yet the drive to find Travis burned stronger with each day. The tragedy of 3 little girls lingered in everyone's mind. They had been the spark that fueled the manhunt. They were the reason no one quit. And then, finally, something shifted. Deep in the search zone, agents came across items that did not belong to the wilderness. A piece of clothing. A footprint pressed into damp soil. A campsite disturbed. Each piece was bagged, tagged, and analyzed. The possibility emerged. Travis Decker was still in the woods. Still alive. Still running. The hunt was no longer about where he had gone. It was about how long he could last and how soon agents could close in. The FBI tightened the net. But the forest was vast. And every hour that passed meant one thing. The manhunt was turning into a waiting game between a fugitive father and an army of agents determined to bring him in. The helicopters could be heard long before they were seen. Their low thrum echoed across valleys, rattling windows and unsettling the quiet towns near Chelan County. To the families who lived there, the noise was constant, a reminder that something dark was still unresolved. In grocery store aisles, people whispered, "Did they find him yet? Where is he hiding?" Children overheard, eyes wide, holding their parents' hands tighter. In classrooms, teachers struggled for words. They lit candles on desks, said quiet prayers, and tried to shield students from details too heavy for young minds. But the children already knew. They had lost 3 classmates, 3 little girls who would not return. Churches opened their doors. Vigils were held almost nightly. Neighbors gathered, candles in hand, their faces lit in soft glow as pastors and community leaders spoke about grief, about justice, about safety. Mothers wept openly. Fathers clenched fists in anger. Some prayed for the daughters. Others prayed for Travis to be caught. The media painted every corner of the story. News vans parked on streets. Cameras pointed at houses and schools. National anchors recited timelines in polished voices, but local reporters spoke with raw emotion. They interviewed neighbors who remembered the children's laughter, friends who once played with them on swings, and teachers who kept their drawings pinned to classroom walls. The tone was the same everywhere. Shock, sorrow, and fear. At night, families locked doors twice. Porch lights were left on. People jumped at small noises outside. In the forests, hunters and hikers hesitated to venture out. The thought of a desperate man lurking in the trees was enough to keep many home. The tragedy also ignited debate. Parents demanded answers. How was Travis able to see his daughters? Why hadn't warning signs been acted upon? Was the custody system broken? Local officials faced tough questions they struggled to answer. Each press conference grew more tense. The faces of sheriffs and spokespeople drawn and tired. Social media spread the case far beyond Washington. Hashtags with the girls' names trended. Photos of their smiling faces were shared thousands of times. Some users expressed grief. Others expressed rage, calling for justice, calling for reform, calling for action. And yet, beneath all the noise, there was silence too. A silence in homes now empty. A silence in hallways where 3 voices were missing. the silence of a mother whose world had been taken in one night. The community's pain was not only about what had happened. It was about what had not yet happened. Travis Decker was still gone, and until he was found, no one felt safe. Every day that passed, the fear deepened. Every night that helicopters flew overhead, people looked out their windows and wondered, was he out there? Was he watching? The FBI manhunt was relentless, but for the people living closest to it, the weight was unbearable. Their grief became fuel, their fear became pressure, and their hope rested on one demand: that the search would end, and that the father who vanished would finally be found. The first week of the manhunt brought urgency. The second brought exhaustion. By the third, frustration had settled like a heavy fog over Chelan County. The FBI tip line never went quiet. Calls poured in from across the state, across the country. Some were earnest. Some were wild. A man hiking near the river swore he saw a figure slipping through the trees. Another claimed Travis had hitchhiked to Spokane. One caller insisted they saw him in a Walmart parking lot hundreds of miles away. Each report was logged. Each one required attention. Agents in dark jackets piled into SUVs, sirens screaming down highways, only to arrive and find nothing. A camper mistaken for Travis. A drifter passing through town. A shadow in the woods that turned out to be nothing at all. The false leads wore on morale. Every wild chase cost time and resources. Every wasted hour meant Travis remained free. Drones scanned valleys, their cameras locking onto heat signatures. Dozens of times agents thought they had him. They rushed in, guns raised, hearts pounding. More than once, the heat source turned out to be a deer bedded down in tall grass. Another time, it was a hunter cooking over a small fire. The dogs, too, led teams down paths that ended in silence. Handlers encouraged them on, hopeful with each bark, only to find the trail fading in the undergrowth. Scent dissipates quickly in the damp Washington air. Travis had been careful. We're lucky. The forest itself seemed to conspire against the search. Rain washed away footprints. Wind scattered scents. Fallen branches obscured trails. A man who knew the land could disappear without trace. Meanwhile, the public grew restless. News broadcasts highlighted each new possible sighting. But when days passed without confirmation, anger replaced hope. Commentators questioned the FBI. How can a single man outwit hundreds of agents? Is he receiving help? Has he already crossed the border? Whispers turned into rumors. Some said Travis had drowned in a river. Others said he was hiding in caves known only to locals. A few believed he had fled the state under a false name, blending into another town like a ghost. The dead ends piled up. For investigators, the pressure was relentless. They faced grieving family members demanding answers, reporters demanding updates, and a nation watching their every move. Inside the command post, tension cracked. Maps were covered with so many pins and notes they looked chaotic. Agents argued over strategy. Some pushed for deeper sweeps into the wilderness. Others urged shifting resources to urban areas, convinced Travis had slipped through checkpoints weeks ago. Still, the hunt continued. Every morning, helicopters lifted off. Every night, drones hovered. The dogs searched. The agents marched. The tips kept coming. But the breakthrough never came. The manhunt had become a cycle of hope and disappointment, a rhythm of false alarms and dead ends. And with each passing day, one chilling truth grew clearer. Travis Decker was still out there, somewhere, and no one knew where. By late summer, the manhunt had slowed. The checkpoints were still active. The helicopters still circled. But the urgency had shifted into a steady grind. For weeks, search teams combed through valleys and ridges, returning with nothing more than scraps of disturbed brush or the occasional campsite long abandoned. Then came the day that changed everything. It was late afternoon when a team of FBI agents and local deputies pushed deeper into a rugged section of forest outside Leavenworth. The terrain was difficult. Steep slopes, tangled roots, and undergrowth so thick it clawed at their boots. Search dogs barked and strained against their leashes, leading handlers through narrow paths. That was when they saw it. Bones. partially buried beneath leaves and soil, scattered as if time and animals had disturbed them. The scene was grim. Agents halted, radios crackling as calls went out. The site was secured. Blue tarps were brought in to shield the area from cameras and drones. Forensic teams were flown in by helicopter before nightfall. The discovery sent shockwaves through the command post. For weeks, the search had yielded nothing. Now suddenly they had remains. The question was immediate. Whose bones were these? Speculation erupted. Were they Travis's? Had he perished in the wilderness, unable to survive the elements? Or were they unrelated, belonging to someone else lost in the forests long before? Investigators worked quickly. Samples were collected. DNA analysis was rushed to federal labs. Agents guarded the site day and night. When news of the discovery reached the public, the reaction was explosive. Headlines blared. Bones found in search for missing father. Local news stations cut into broadcasts. Reporters crowded outside sheriff's offices, pressing for details. Social media lit up with theories. Some insisted the hunt was finally over, that Travis Decker was dead. Others argued it was a trick, that he had planted remains to throw searchers off his trail. For the grieving mother, the discovery reopened wounds. She had lost her daughters. Now she faced the possibility that the man accused of taking them had escaped justice by dying in the wilderness. Friends said her grief was mixed with anger. "It's too easy," one relative told reporters. "He doesn't get to vanish into the forest. He has to answer for what he did." As the lab tested samples, the FBI remained cautious. Officials refused to confirm identities until results were final. Behind closed doors, investigators debated next steps. If the bones were Travis's, the manhunt would end, but the questions would not. If they were not his, then the search was far from over. Days passed. The wait stretched into weeks. The forest had finally given up a secret, but it was a secret that only deepened the mystery. The discovery of bones had changed the course of the manhunt. It had reignited the public's attention. It had reminded everyone that the wilderness does not keep things hidden forever. But whether it was closure or a cruel twist remained to be seen. Months had passed since the daughters were found. Weeks since bones were uncovered in the forest. Yet the name Travis Decker still carried weight in Washington. For investigators, the manhunt was far from over. For the community, the fear never fully left. The FBI has kept the case active. His face remains on wanted posters, on digital billboards along highways, on the FBI's most wanted database. His description is broadcast again and again. Early 40s, lean build, armed and dangerous. The hotline number flashes on screens, urging anyone with information to call. Checkpoints no longer dominate Chelan County the way they once did, but patrols continue. Agents rotate in and out, some assigned to sweep remote valleys, others to monitor tips coming in from across the country. The bones found in the search zone were analyzed. The results confirmed they belonged to a human male, but the process of final identification was slower than the public wanted. Forensic experts worked carefully, knowing a mistake could shift the entire case. Officials have not publicly released the final match. That silence keeps the speculation alive. Is Travis dead? Or is he still out there? Some locals believe he never made it out of the woods. They say the mountains are too unforgiving, the elements too harsh. Others are convinced he escaped early, slipping past roadblocks in those chaotic first days. They whisper that he could be living under a new name, blending into another state, even another country. For the FBI, both possibilities remain open. Behind closed doors, analysts revisit evidence. Gas receipts, bank accounts, past associates. They scour border crossings, airport logs, and surveillance footage from towns far beyond Washington. Leads continue to trickle in, some from hundreds of miles away, each one chasing the same question. Is Travis alive? The community lives in a strange tension. Life has resumed, schools reopened, shops bustling again. But the memory of what happened lingers like a shadow. Parents glance twice at strangers. Campers hesitate before venturing into the forest. In churches, prayers for justice continue. Journalists check in on the case every few weeks, writing updates that rarely contain new breakthroughs. The headlines are the same: FBI still searching. Case remains open. Family still waiting for closure. For the grieving mother, closure has been elusive. She mourns her daughters daily, but her anger remains sharp. In rare interviews, she says the same words: "He must be found." And so the search continues, not as loudly as before, not with the same swarms of helicopters and flashing lights, but steadily, methodically, like an ember that refuses to die. The story of Travis Decker is no longer just a local tragedy. It has become a symbol, a reminder of how quickly trust can shatter, a warning of how one act can ripple through families, towns, and entire states. And until there is proof, until the bones are confirmed, or until he is caught, the manhunt will remain unfinished. The forest holds its secrets, the FBI holds its silence, and the community holds its breath. When the helicopters left and the checkpoints thinned, silence returned to Chelan County. But it was not the same silence as before. It was heavier, carried memory, it carried loss. 3 young girls were gone, their laughter erased in a single weekend, their futures stolen before they could unfold. Their names became part of a tragedy too painful for many to say out loud. And a father, a man meant to protect them, vanished. Whether dead or alive, his absence left a hole that could not be filled. For the investigators, the case became more than a mission. It became personal. They carried photos of the girls on their phones. They spoke their names in briefings. They refused to forget why they searched, even when the trails went cold. For the mother, the weight is different. She must live with questions that have no clear answers. She must wake each morning knowing her daughters are gone, and knowing the man accused of taking them has never stood before a judge. Her grief is not quiet. It is a demand that justice, in some form, must come. For the community, the story became a warning. Parents are more cautious. Custody cases are watched more closely. Neighbors pay more attention when something feels wrong. The case reminded everyone that violence does not always come from strangers. Sometimes it comes from those closest to us. And for the nation, the name Travis Decker became another entry in a long list of mysteries that remain unsolved. Another case where the line between guilt and disappearance blurs, leaving families without closure. What do we take from this story? That life is fragile, that trust can be broken, that systems meant to protect children do not always succeed, that communities must remain vigilant, not out of paranoia, but out of love. And perhaps most importantly, that grief can become strength. The vigils, the prayers, the marches, each one was an act of defiance against silence. Each one said the same thing: these girls will not be forgotten. The forest may keep its secrets. The FBI may keep its files. But the memory of 3 daughters lost will remain. And the final truth, the one whispered in living rooms, in churches, and in classrooms, is this: when a parent turns from protector to predator, it is the community that must stand guard. It is the community that must be the shield. The case of Travis Decker is unfinished. The manhunt remains open. The answers are incomplete. But the lesson is clear. Families are meant to be safe places. Parents are meant to protect. When that bond is broken, the damage extends far beyond one home. It ripples through neighborhoods, schools, and entire towns. It reminds us that vigilance matters, that silence can be dangerous, and that justice must never rest. 3 young girls should still be alive today. Their laughter should still echo in classrooms, in playgrounds, in their mother's arms. Instead, their memory stands as a reminder that life is fragile, and that communities must remain watchful and strong. This story does not end neatly. Perhaps one day the search will. Perhaps one day the truth will be known. But until then, the shadows of the Washington forests hold secrets only time can reveal. You've been watching Storyline Chronicles. We bring you the stories that test the human heart, stories that ask hard questions, and stories that must not be forgotten. If the story moved you, leave a comment below. Tell us what lesson you take from it. Subscribe so you don't miss the next investigation. And share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. because every story teaches something, and together we keep them alive.